This is WGRG 100.5 FM, where we meet the absolute minimum FCC broadcasting standards. It's time to hang on and brace yourself for a community radio program that's frankly indescribable. Let's talk Geneseo. Two guys with nothing better to do on a Friday morning but to talk about our community. Geneseo City Administrator Brandon Meglin and City Alderman Keith Kennett. And yeah, nobody, and I mean nobody, puts the blah in blah, blah, blah like these guys do.
And good morning. You're listening to WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo. And here we are. Keith Kennett, your co-host, along with Brandon Meglin, with our squeaky, kind of a squeaky microphone thing.
WD-40 for that one.
Yeah, we'll have to get our crack maintenance staff on it.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you.
A lot going on tonight in town.
There is a lot going on, Brandon. And, I wore a costume. Why didn't you? Little humor, get it? That's for the people viewing. It's just my natural look.
Oh, boy.
Yes. Trick-or-treating tonight, 4 to 7 p.m.
Yep.
In Geneseo. Football game tonight. Mm-hmm. Busy weekend. Time change weekend.
Sunday,
Correct.
Yeah. Sunday, I believe.
That is correct, right?
Yeah, a lot going on in town. There'll be a lot of messaging going out to Rochelle from the police department today. There's opening night of the play here at the high school, I believe, too. So a little bit of going to be a traffic situation. Hopefully there's plenty of parking, and there's a plan in place with Rochelle too to make sure that everybody knows where to park, and that law enforcement's out there and we're aware of what's going on, because trick-or-treating is also going on. So we want to make sure everybody's safe. And they're going to be passing out glow sticks at all of the elementary schools today, and encouraging everybody to make sure they're lit up well in town when they're out and about on the sidewalks. So.
Yes, and so it will be a lot happening in town. As Brandon referenced, a lot of extra traffic and stuff. So particularly in that probably 6 to 7, the entire period, but 6 to 7, it's going to be dark and people kind of rushing around for different things. So just be a little careful, a little extra cautious, and trick-or-treaters just do the best you can to be. You're excited about trick-or-treating, but hopefully you follow. Look both ways before you're crossing the road and all that stuff too. But everybody will be in place to do what we can, as always, to keep it a safe and happy event for the community. Contacting the Rochelle Police, you mentioned we're contacting Rochelle to...
Yeah, I think just coordination with the school and the football program on,
okay.
Being safe when the fans come into town.
Excellent.
And all that good stuff. Yeah.
All right. Well, very good job. I assume we will give a lot of that to Chief Casey, doing everything he does to keep our community safe. And also, I know that it's been a focus of the entire City Hall staff as well to work with us, and the school district also. It's nice. It's one of these things behind the scenes. I know there are a lot of options discussed, and everybody came up with a nice unified plan to address everything. So. Yeah. So there you go. Well, with that, though, we'll turn it right over to you, because we're happy to have a guest with us this morning that has a very interesting history and a lot of good information to share with us this morning.
Yeah. For those watching on the stream and the live broadcast, I can see there's a third person in the room. We have Tim Plekovich with us here this morning, author and former Cubs baseball scout, amongst many other things, I feel like, Tim.
Former continuity writer, commercial writer too, Brandon, because I worked at the old WGEN while I was in college. I'd come home in the summers and work at the radio station. And Mary Ellen Lebedo and her husband and her husband Joe were the owners. Just wonderful people. I think I drove their son Jim a little nuts while I was there, though, because he also worked at the station, and sometimes he didn't always see the humor in some of the commercials that I wrote. We used to have a couple of funeral homes in town. One, Brandon, was the Wright Funeral Home, and the other was the Meyer Funeral Home. And they eventually merged, but then when they were separate, we had both of those accounts. I was just thinking about this as we were sitting here, thinking, gosh, I'm on the radio again in Geneseo. And so most of our commercials by that time were taped, but there were some that were live. And one time I handed the script to our guy who was on the air, and this was for Wright Funeral Home, and Keith, right at the end of the script, it said, "So remember, when the time comes, die right."
Well, there you have to like that tagline.
And then the other one I came up with was "Expire with Meyer."
Like it.
Fortunately, the person who was reading those caught those before, and he ad-libbed and said something else instead of the endings on the script. Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to laugh a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Well, if this program ever gets any sponsors, we know the guy to come to.
You are the man, Tim. We're
Or
roping
drive
you
them
in.
away, one of the two.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, you have a really interesting story, and you're doing a lot. You know, I see you out and about everywhere here recently in the past month or
Yeah,
so.
I'm the most
promoting.
ubiquitous person in Geneseo right now, I think. Yeah.
You you can really see it. You're always popping around with your poster boards and promoting things that are coming up, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Sure.
But I think, and I feel like we could talk to you for about an hour, but we have about another 15 minutes with you. But why don't the part of your story at a young age was becoming a baseball scout for the Chicago Cubs, and you just spoke on this topic at the Geneseo Library recently. So, can you tell us how you got into this?
At the time that I was writing commercials too, though, Brandon, I was equivocating over which route to take. Did I want to become a baseball scout or a commercial writer and stay at WGEN and work for the Lebedos? And so I opted to go to work for the Cubs. But yeah, this was something, a baseball association that I had going all the way back to when I was in junior high. Our family, my mom and dad, would always take my brother and me to different parts of the country on vacations during the summertime, and we also coordinated the trips so that we could hit games at different major league parks. And so this would have been when I was 13 years old. We were in Philadelphia, and so, Keith, we went to a Philly game, and I bought a yearbook, and in the back of the yearbook it listed the different Philadelphia scouts throughout the country, 4 of whom were in Illinois. So that next year, when I was a freshman in high school, when I was 14, I decided it might be fun one day in study hall when I wasn't doing anything, because kids never study in study hall. So I wrote to this scout with the Phillies. I brought the yearbook with me. It had his address. And so I wrote to him, and I told him I wanted to hook on with the Phillies, and didn't say how old I was. And so at the end of class, I went into the office, and one of the school secretaries, I asked her for an envelope. She wasn't sure why, and then I said to her, "Do you have a stamp?" And then I just said, "Could you put this in the outgoing mail?" Well, sure enough, the scout with the Phillies, who was a supervisor of scouts, and I didn't realize that at the time, he contacted me just a few days later and explained to me as much as he could about scouting, and that if I would ever like to recommend a ball player, feel free to do so. Well, I recommended someone that next summer. The Phillies weren't interested in drafting him, but the Yankees did drafting him. So this supervisor with the Phillies thought, well, gosh, maybe this guy knows what he's doing. So then a few months later, he contacted me, and he said, for the 1976 season, we'd like to employ you, put you on the payroll as a part-time scout for the Phillies. And I said, well, Mr. Bradley, that's great, but we only have one problem. I said, I don't have a driver's license. And so we stayed in touch. And so it was through this gentleman that I was able to end up working for the Cubs. There were several Philadelphia people who came to the Cubs when the Tribune Company bought the team. And Keith, you might remember, because you're a little bit older than Brandon. I'm actually quite a bit older.
That's much more accurate.
Do you remember Dallas Green?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So Dallas Green's folks came from the Phillies to the Cubs. And so when that happened, my friend George Bradley, who by that time had left the Phillies and become the scouting director for the Tigers, put in some good words for me with his Philadelphia friends. And so that was how that came about. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And we probably don't have time to go year by year because we're only in 1976 and we only have about 5 minutes left. So,
Well, before we transition into some of the other things, what I guess tell us about what's one of your neatest memories in your time with the organization?
I would say probably, because I didn't have a particularly large area, Brandon, so I would say the time that I had the opportunity to sign a kid out of the Quincy area, a little town called Plymouth, Illinois, close to Quincy, and he was very green, just an 18-year-old kid. I don't think he'd ever been outside of the area, probably. Sent him to the Appalachian League, as far out as they could send you, and he had a very difficult time that first year. He was very homesick, and it was a disaster, but the organization stuck with him. He had a terrific year, his second campaign then, and although he didn't make it with the Cubs, he was traded to Milwaukee for a major league catcher that the Cubs procured. So I always felt like I was helping the organization that way, being kind of responsible for the Cubs getting this major league catcher named Mike Martin. And he was a backup, Keith, to Jody Davis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I would say that. And just the opportunity, though, to meet a lot of people whom I had revered as a kid. You guys are probably, no doubt, are familiar with Buck O'Neill, the longtime great player from what they called the Negro Leagues. And he actually became the first African-American coach at the major league level with the Cubs. And so he was one of my contemporaries, and I just think how extraordinary that was for a young guy the way I was, to have this baseball icon who was calling me, asking me for help and information sometimes.
Nice. So, you also dabbled in the political arena a little bit. You're obviously a major history buff, so I guess transition us from baseball scouting to you having this history interest and political interest.
Sure. I should say, though, that after working for the Cubs, I accepted a position with a Boston radio station covering the Red Sox. And so I wasn't part of the crew that would go on away games, but I was doing interviews, pregame interviews, postgame interviews after the games at Fenway Park. So I did that for 3 years, then transitioned into teaching and politics. Moved to New York. I was teaching, and in my spare time, I became involved in some political campaigns. And you guys probably won't know this name, but a longtime state senator in New York, his name was Roy Goodman. And as I mentioned, that name probably won't mean anything to you, but he was the heir to the Ex-Lax fortune. And so I became involved in his campaigns, and a congressman, a U.S. House rep who represented what they called the Silk Stocking District in New York, named Bill Green, and he was the heir to the S&H Green Stamps fortune. So working on those campaigns, and I met someone who ended up becoming a dear friend, William F. Buckley O'Reilly, call him Billy, and we became very active, and so anyway, I was tapped then the following year after the '88 campaign to serve as Rudy Giuliani's campaign coordinator for the western section of Queens, which is a borough, of course, in New York City. And then that led to other things after that. But those were all wonderful experiences, too. And Giuliani lost in just a razor thin margin in 1989, and then eventually ran for mayor a second time, and of course the rest was history.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of writing. You have some published works, and that has all these experiences have led you to have a lot of contacts with really interesting people, and you're now. You live back here in Geneseo now, and you're looking to bring some of this history and some of these interesting experiences back to the community here, which is just great. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, the first book that I wrote, just briefly, Brandon, was composed of narratives of World War II veterans. But there's a catch to this. they all had dads, not their grandfathers or great-grandfathers, but these World War II veterans, Keith, all had dads who fought in the Civil War. And so it's possible, and there's still someone living out there who is the son of a Civil War soldier. And there are a couple of women who are still living as well, who are the daughters. And this book, Civil War Fathers, garnered a lot of national coverage, so it led to a lot of speaking engagements around the country and threw me in with the company of some very interesting people. And so I would start to see, just a lot of the same faces. We were kind of on the same track as far as different venues around the country where we would speak. And one of the venues where a lot of us were invited was over in Missouri, about 20 miles east of Springfield, Missouri. And at this festival, it's called the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival. And every year, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of American presidents all descend on this tiny town in the Ozarks, and they put on programs for the locals. And it is burgeoned now into an international festival. But some of the guests that I've lined up to come to Geneseo in the next several months are regular attendees at this, as well as some of the other guests that we procured, because it isn't just confined just to the people who are descended from U.S. presidents, but other people of historical significance. So we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Yeah.
Very interesting. So let's get into, you just had a presentation, like I mentioned before, on your history with the Cubs.
Yes.
As the scout. And
I'd just like to thank all the people, Brandon, who came out for that, because it was so much fun. We just had a terrific time at the library.
Yeah.
So, it was great.
Capacity crowd, you said. You need a bigger
Well, I
venue.
didn't say it. That's the rumor, but it looked like it was a capacity crowd. Yeah.
It's not the largest
We drew
room,
more than
right?
the White Sox do. So,
Yeah, we've been talking to Tim about getting them a bigger space, maybe, getting them out at Richmond Hill Park for an outdoor.
Yeah,
one of these
that sounded
days.
like a terrific venue that we could have. Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us about, with the last few minutes that we have, some of the things that you have scheduled coming up? I know we got a great one coming up here at Central Schoolhouse, and going to be speaking at a number of venues in Geneseo.
Yes, very soon, Brandon. We have the grandson, and once again, this one is not a great-grandson or great-great-grandson. It's actually a grandson of President Grover Cleveland. And Grover Cleveland, for instance, was born in 1837, but this is his grandson. And Keith, he's just a little bit older than we are, not much. And he was born 115 years later. So he didn't know Grover, but he is a Cleveland historian and just a terrific guy. George Cleveland, the grandson, has spent the last couple of months cruising on the Pacific on the different cruise ships, giving programs on his presidential grandfather. Also, this gentleman's father, and this would be Grover Cleveland's son, also was someone of historical significance. He was a high-powered Washington attorney back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so this George has a very illuminating, interesting historical background. And he will be over speaking at the Schoolhouse, the bed and breakfast, on Tuesday, November 18th. He will be there from 8:30 until 10 for a breakfast. This is open to the public. This is the only event during the day that he's taking part in, Brandon, that is a paid event. But if anyone is interested, please feel free to contact me at 309-253-5377. That's 309-253-5377. We still have about 7 tickets available, so I'd be happy to set someone up in case they'd be interested in having breakfast with George and finding out what were some of his grandfather's culinary delights for breakfast. I'll tell you just one little part of that. He loved eating pig's feet for breakfast.
So are we serving pig's feet at the schoolhouse?
Well, we had considered that, but we're going to pass on that. Yeah. And then he will be speaking midday at noon to the Rotary, and then at 2:00 he's going to be up at the library for an engagement. I'm going to be interviewing him there. Each program, the subject matter is going to be just a little bit different. And at the library, we're going to be talking about presidential genealogy. And his ancestry is so interesting, unlike so many Americans, which, you know, it's kind of a cornucopia at this point of many different nationalities meshing together. Well, in George's case, he's entirely of Puritan New England descent. And we actually share a Cleveland ancestry. We have common Cleveland ancestors, not through the Pletkovich side, but through my mother's ancestry. So I think that'll be a fun program to do with him. And then he's going to cap off the day by speaking to Kiwanis Club in the evening, and that will be at 6:30. So 2:00 for the program at the library, and then 6:30 to end the day at Kiwanis Club. So he's going to be a busy man.
Very nice. And
then, yeah, some of the other ones that we have coming up along those lines, someone else whom I've had the opportunity to come to know is a gentleman named Ulysses Grant Dietz, ostensibly a descendant of President Ulysses Grant. And he is a Grant historian. He's the former curator of the Newark, New Jersey Museum, and somebody with tremendous in-depth knowledge about his great-great-grandfather, President Grant. He will be coming to town to put on multiple programs. We have the great-great-granddaughter of Dred Scott, who's going to be coming to town. Those of you who may not be as historically inclined as the three of us are, but you probably have heard that name or are wondering, where have I heard that name? Well, Dred Scott was the slave who in 1857 sued the United States for his freedom because his owner, a gentleman by the name of Samford, had taken him outside of the South, where they were living in Missouri, brought him north. They were living in Rock Island for a short time, and I believe across the river in Davenport, and then moved on and lived for a time in Wisconsin. So Dred Scott felt, and the people who were supporting him, that based upon this, his owner was breaking the law by taking him into free states and living there. So Dred Scott sued for his freedom, lost though when it went to the United States Supreme Court. The court was packed with Southerners, and so I believe Dred Scott only received one vote in his favor. So actually, technically, guys, for 4 years, from 1857 until 1861, when the Civil War broke out, slavery was actually legal in the United States for those 4 years after the Supreme Court ruling. And very little was paid, very little attention was given to it, because in the newspapers around the country, I've seen articles, and it wasn't something like you'd see in the Daily Mirror over in London or in the New York Post, you know, big headlines. It would just be little articles, you know, about Dred Scott, maybe just like a 15-word blurb, 20-word blurb, something like that. We also have, and this is getting a little bit away from history, but it's intertwined with history. We have the executive vice president of the National Football League, who will be coming either in May or June, and his name is Peter O'Reilly. Peter is in charge of the Pro Bowl, the Super Bowl, and the NFL player draft. And so he will be coming for multiple speaking engagements. And I was just very fortunate to be able to procure him. We're good friends. He and his father and I collaborated on a book, one of our books called Nuns, Nazis, and Notre Dame, Stories of the Great Depression, World War II, and the Fighting Irish. Peter is going to be bringing my dear friend with him, who is his half-brother, and that is William F. Buckley O'Reilly, better known as Billy. And he will be doing a presentation, several programs, on his uncle, William F. Buckley, Jr. And for those who remember William F. Buckley Jr., and I know Keith does, longtime host, about the 50-year host of Firing Line, the political program which was on public broadcasting. Also, he had a Longtime magazine, which is still circulating. Very popular syndicated newspaper columnist in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Someone who was always in the news. A philanthropist. You always saw him. He was on the cover of Time magazine one time. So just a very, very interesting person. If you are of that age, you will remember William F. Buckley Jr. Kind of a controversial guy, but what a wonderful human being, very benevolent, as are almost all of the members of his family. I greatly appreciate and am indebted to them for their friendship over the years. So that's just kind of a smattering of the people that we have lined up.
Great. Well, geez.
I was going to say,
Wow.
what an uneventful life you've been leading so far, Tim. But wow, I mean, that is just, any one or two of those experiences, you would consider to be a real special time in one's life. But it's amazing
Keith, what was interesting, too, about the first book, the Civil War Fathers book, with that unique anomaly in it, that started out as a middle school project that I was doing with my students. And there was an article in the local Peoria paper. It went out over the AP wire, and all of a sudden we had different major dailies reporters who were contacting us to do individual stories. So we had two stories in the Wall Street Journal, Chicago Trib, the Washington Times. Then when those articles came out, then we had publishing companies starting to contact us. Mm-hmm. And so it all worked out wonderfully. The book did terrifically with Vandermeer Press, which for years was a large Washington, D.C. publisher, later moved outside of D.C., but it just was a fantastic arrangement with them. And I worked it out so that most of the royalties went back into a trust fund for those middle school students, so that when it came time for them to go to college, they could apply to the trust fund for the royalties that had been placed there. So it's been a very rewarding life. And I just try to pack the most, Keith, into every single day.
Well, boy, and you do. And to our middle school listeners, there you go. That sets a nice threshold or a high bar or what have you when you're doing your middle school project. Well, to have, but it goes to show, though, that you really never know where something may end up. But
you never know. And so I hope that some of the middle school students in town and high school students will be able to come to one of the Grover Cleveland programs. I'm assuming the best one, and just talking with the high school principal a few minutes ago, sounds like the most agreeable one would be the 2 o'clock program at the library. So everybody come on out. I hope that you have the opportunity to take advantage of at least one of these programs and meet a really congenial guy, a super interesting guy, with tremendous historical insight. George Cleveland, the grandson of our 2-term, albeit unconsecutive term, president, Grover Cleveland. Only other person to do that is Donald Trump.
Yeah, I feel like, Tim, you're the example of why it's important and for students to stay curious.
Yes.
You just went down all of these different paths and routes and are obviously a very passionate person on continuing exploration even to today. So,
and now I just like picking up different projects, Brandon, and one of which the last couple of years I've become very, very involved in an organization in Croatia called the Ponosno Pero Association. And what that organization does, they help indigent Serbian families who are still living in Croatia. And I became involved in that through different cousins whom I have who live in the Balkans, many of whom still reside in Croatia. And so that's been a lot of fun. And I'll be going over again this Christmas and doing some work for that organization. So, as long as we remain curious, Keith, like you said, there's so many paths and so many ways that we can affect our lives and the lives of others.
Well, I'll tell you what, Keith and I will be looking for some more projects for you,
In your free time, Tim.
Yeah, in my free time, right. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this very, very much. Brandon, it's been wonderful having the association with you this fall. I appreciate all the plugs you've been giving for our programs, and it means a great deal.
Yeah. Well, thanks for what you're doing for the community. I think you doing it on your own accord, bringing the history here and experiences for adults and students alike. So it's a great thing.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Yeah.
You're welcome.
We'll turn our focus now to city business. Keith, anything? We talked about trick or treat. We talked about what's going on for tonight. Stay safe out there. We had a city council meeting this week.
Probably maybe a brief update, but no, we had a unexpected water main issue over by McDonald's. Maybe
2 nights
quick
ago.
little.
Yeah, so South Oakwood, Route 6, right in front of Blackhawk State Bank there. That was a large main that ruptured out there. And that was about, 7 o'clock 2 nights ago. So what happened there is you had a rupture and a lot of water spilling out at a very rapid pace. And so we saw a lot of our water pressure go down, especially on the south side of town with the South Water Tower there that feeds. When you're dumping that much water out of the system, you see the pressure drop, or maybe no pressure at all, until they were able to get that part of the system contained and the shutdown that took place. And then we saw water pressure go back up pretty quickly there. They worked into the wee morning hours to do the repairs out there. And so we appreciate the water department and Chad Van de Woestijn, everybody that was on that call, Dalton Whittington and his team, to get that taken care of, quick response. And one of those things that does come up.
It happens.
So at City Council, we see a lot of budgeting for continued water main replacement and repair projects coming up in the next couple of years too. Important to stay on top of.
Yep. And but other than that, I think, and I can't share too much because I actually was not at the cow meeting on Tuesday night, but I know from the agenda or what have you, there were some things we're still doing some rate work, looking at that, and other things as well, but really nothing too dramatic or anything that came out of the meeting. That at least
budget
I
night,
believe
budget presentation.
I missed the budget presentation.
You missed the budget meeting. It's a biggie.
That sounds riveting, guys.
It is. It's a lot of good information, and it's presented well. But you need to be focused.
Yeah. And then, another biggie announcement of the expansion of the Edwards construction business on Chicago Street, which, we're not getting into too many details yet, other than they have plans for a pretty major expansion, which will lead into annexation of land into the city of Geneseo, opportunity for job growth, some really great stuff there that we'll continue to work on. We're going to be going out for RFP for a TIF consultant, tax increment financing district, to look at a way to assist them with these additions in extending sanitary sewer into that area down Ford Road there. For this, as we coordinate for what's a large and a good project for the community in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And JF Edwards, everybody's probably familiar with John, but for years, a locally owned business that had grown, and don't quote me exactly on the time frame, but maybe 10 years or so ago, it was sold off. But the new ownership has taken it and definitely run with it, and they have actually been doing kind of quietly expansions and modifications and stuff here in town. But it is if the entire plan falls into place and what have you, it's a tremendous benefit for the community as they expand and the business grows. So big shout out to them, and it's good to have in town.
Big deal to have them here. Lots of good jobs. The trades, different skill sets, things that you need a lot of training for, hiring a lot of people around our community here and expanding that and keeping the business here in Geneseo is a big deal for us here in Henry County. So we appreciate what they're doing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think we pretty much covered it. And again, as we talked, though, happy Halloween, trick-or-treating tonight from 4 to 7. Be a little extra cautious if you're out and about driving through that entire time, but especially as it gets dark. And 6 to 7 as you're heading over here to the high school for the football game or for the fall play. Just a lot going on in our community. Change your clocks Sunday morning early, and
Yeah, what is it? The
2 a.m. What is
strike
that?
at midnight, Saturday night, Sunday morning. Is that?
I think it's
I don't know.
it's
Don't
a
do it.
2 or-
Don't do what we say.
Yeah,
look
just-
it up on Google.
Exactly. and that's just generally good information. You may want to verify anything like that. And not to have this go any longer, but there's been talk about, do we want to keep doing the daylight savings time, switching the clocks back and forth? It seems that kind of becomes kind of a hot topic, and then you don't hear about it much for a few years. But I wonder if at some point, I know there's some parts of the country that don't change.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's way above our pay grade, isn't it, Brandon?
Right. I say maintain the time. What do you think, Tim?
Well, I remember in 8th grade, guys, that so that would have been 1974. I think Nixon was trying to take the heat off of him because we didn't change time
I remember
in
that.
October. Because back then it was October, Keith, when we changed. So I could remember, going to school in the dark, and and I think that was probably attributed to Watergate.
we need a distraction, but yeah, and I think, as I recall too, is that there was then some concern about you had students waiting for buses and stuff, and it's pitch black out.
Yes.
And, so there are a lot of factors that go into it, but
Right.
But anyway, there you go. All right. Well, Tim, thank you very much for coming in. Brandon, always a pleasure. And that's going to wrap up this week's edition of Let's Talk Geneseo. We pretty much appreciate you tuning in. And this is WGRG 100.5 FM in Geneseo. Have a great weekend.